These aren't the stories your mother told you. No, these are the other stories.
Today's episode of The Other Stories is But Not For Love, written by William Shaw and narrated by Georgia Cook.
Duke Senior was not a young man, but still, his death was remarkable. He had survived a coup, several years of rough living in icy woods, the loss and sudden recovery of his daughter with barely a frown. But now, someone or something had succeeded where vengeful brothers and woodland predators had failed. The Duke was dead, and what's more, murdered. He was found by a chambermaid in the humid middle hours of a summer's morning. The stench of rotting meat was overpowering and only grew as the other servants picked through the wreckage. His left arm dangled over the door of his wardrobe. His right foot nestled in the unmade bed. The flesh was waxy and miscoloured, spotted all over with small black marks. His head lay in pride of place in the centre of the room, and on the wall behind it, a message in blood. The tyrant Duke lies proudly slain, a fever creeps into the brain, and while our rulers dance their reels, they know not they shall make my meals. The servants looked at one another, pale and grim-faced. One thing was clear, young Orlando was in big trouble. Young Orlando, however, was already several miles away. He had happened to call on his father-in-law early that morning and had straightaway realised not only the horror of the scene, but the immediate danger it presented. He had, of course, an alibi. He had been all last night, as every night, in the company of his wife Rosalind, but there was no denying the facts. He had, as the Duke's male heir, more to gain than anyone else from his death, and the grisly poem daubed on the wall was a dead ringer for his own literary style. There was nothing for it but to grab his wife and flee. Yet for all the situation's danger, Orlando was struck by its familiarity. He was once more on the road to the Forest of Arden, and once more arguing with his wife. "If you didn't do it, who did?" demanded Rosalind. "I don't know," replied Orlando. "But whoever it was, they might kill again. We've got to warn Frederick." "Uncle Freddie?" Rosalind rolled her eyes. "How do we know he didn't do it? It won't be the first time he turned on father." "But he's a different person now," protested Orlando. "He won't even eat meat these days. Besides, Frederick was never much of a poet, nor was whatever wrote that message. You know what I mean. It's just not the sort of thing he'd do." "Well, you might be right," said Rosalind. "But if it wasn't him, who was it?" Who indeed, thought Orlando. Who indeed? Rosalind and Orlando could always find a welcome in the Forest of Arden. Besides Uncle Frederick, there was Olivia and Celia, Touchstone and Audrey. Even their old frenemy Jacques had his hovel not 5 minutes' walk from the clearing where they'd all danced and sung those 5 happy summers ago. The young couple found their friends in that familiar clearing, speaking in hushed voices. A foul smell mingled with the perfume of the forest. The nearby trees were stained a dull brownish red. Their friends fell silent as they noticed Rosalind and Orlando's approach, and parted to reveal the object of their fear. Duke Frederick's tongue had been nailed to a tree. The rest of him lay scattered around, bones poking out at sickening angles. The carcass was already attracting the local wildlife. The Duke's mouth was so filled with flies it appeared to be chewing, and Oliver was forced to chase away the crows who stubbornly circled the corpse. The ex-Duke's flesh was studded with puncture marks, and beside the grim tableau lay a large flat rock bearing the bloody message. I must confess an element of sport, as of a pleasure boat in mercantile ports, in my good eating of this godly man. Let anyone reclaim him if they can, for though I ripped them both to shreds for art, I never could tell these brothers apart. The strange party surveyed the scene, the reek of blood and the buzzing of flies. "Well," said Touchstone, finally breaking the silence. At least we know it wasn't a lion this time. Night falls quickly in the Forest of Arden. Nobody had said much all afternoon, as they buried Frederick's remains and ate a rough and simple meal. But as the little band settled around the fire, sentences began to form amongst them. "You can't deny it's artfully done," said Jacques. "Jacques," said Audrey, "how can you say that? 2 men are dead." "Men die from time to time," said Jacques. "I believe it was you who first told us that, Princess." He nodded at Rosalind, who scowled at him. "There's a difference between a flight of rhetoric and an actual murder," she snapped. "Aye," said Touchstone. "Everyone knows not to take a drag artist's cattiness too seriously." "Touchstone!" cried Audrey. "I think we're getting off topic," said Orlando. "You're right, Orlando," said Celia. "What I want to know is, how did you kill my daddy in the middle of the night, then get back to court in time to kill Rosalind's?" "You're not suggesting I. Who else would want to kill them both? You took revenge on my father for banishing you, and then you killed Senior to get his dukedom, and you marked both of their deaths with your usual terrible poems. My poems are not... Anyway, if that was true, why would I come back here? I've read murder ballads. The killers always return to the scene of the crime." "Wait," said Rosalind. "How do we know Duke Frederick was killed at night?" "Because of me," said Oliver. "We met up yesterday for a drink, and he was telling me about this amazing bird only seen at the crack of dawn. The autumn phoenix, he called it. Orange and red, like part of the tree has leapt forward in time. Anyway, he told me to come and see it at sunrise. That's when I found what was left." "Ah, punctuality," said Touchstone. "Thief of time, saviour of poets. So whoever killed them did it after dark," said Rosalind. "That's interesting. But to kill them both in the same night, and to rip them apart like that. Man is a cruel beast," said Jacques. "He may be capable of great perversions yet. And with that, my young loves, I take my leave." "What?" said Celia. "I think we should stick together," said Orlando. "Nay," said Jacques. "I would be alone. This mysterious assailant probably just wanted revenge on the tyrant brothers. I doubt we shall hear from him again. And I shall sleep the sleep of the unjust. Good night." It was an artful thing, the scene of Jacques' death. They found him by the ancient stream, where he had once mourned the life of a deer. His body, too, was covered in puncture marks, but where the 2 dukes had been torn to pieces, Jacques' body lay mostly intact, apart from the fact that his head had been ripped off and replaced with that of a deer. This time the attacker had carved their message into a broad-limbed oak tree. It was an altogether more considered killing. "Where once this man lay weeping for a doe, I now declare a sentence on my foe. For as this man dies now among the deer, so comes the death of him I once held dear." "Well," said Touchstone, "I've heard of..." "Touchstone, if you say you've heard of a stag night but this is ridiculous, I will kill you myself," said Celia. "Sorry," said Touchstone. "Just trying to lighten the mood." "Well, don't." "I hope this time you accept it couldn't have been me," said Orlando. "And why not, pray tell? I was with you all last night. There's no way I could have done this." "And I suppose you expect us to think you incapable of deception?" asked Celia. "He is," cut in Rosalind. "Rosalind," said Orlando. "Shut up," said Rosalind. "Look at the body. It has the same puncture marks as before, like he's been bitten by something with sharp canines." "I met a sharp canine once," said Touchstone. "We played fetch and he beat me." "Hush, Touchstone," said Audrey. "Can't you see she's thinking?" "So comes the death of him I once held dear," said Rosalind. She looked around the group. "The death of him I once held dear. That narrows the next target down to Touchstone, Oliver, and Orlando." "Who would want to kill me?" asked Touchstone. "Barring a theatre critic. The only person I've ever pissed off is Orlando," said Oliver, "and we know he didn't do it." "So that leaves me," said Orlando. "But who could possibly want to kill me?" Rosalind's face brightened. "Of course! That's it! What is? Asked Oliver. Everyone be quiet, said Rosalind. She was smirking now, and Orlando looked nervous. I've got an idea. There was hunger in the air as the sun set over the Forest of Arden, a hunger that clung to the trees and scattered the undergrowth with unnatural swiftness. It sniffed the air and smelled fear. Good. Its quarry was not far off. A young man ambled through the trees, little suspecting this night would be his last. Just a little further on, and the predator could swoop down unencumbered. He was a tall lad, breathing heavily, his cap bobbing among the lower-hanging branches. Just a little further, the beast licked its lips and tensed its legs, ready to land the killing blow. Just a little further. Now, the young man swerved from the path and cried, "Heave!" The predator found itself surrounded by rope, around, above, below. The crude net lifted him up into the air as Rosalind turned around, pulling off her page's cap and letting her hair fall around her face. The others emerged from their hiding places with pale faces and burning torches. What? Spluttered Orlando, as the vampire writhed and snarled against his bonds. I'm afraid so, love, said Rosalind. Servant Adam of Sir Roland de Bois, I presume. It was hard to believe, but impossible to deny. The old man hung before them, transformed. His once blue and melancholy eyes were now a savage red. His once lined face was flushed with stolen blood. His once drooping and toothless mouth pierced with slender fangs. He glowered at his captors, then raised his voice in a guttural shriek. Yes, it is I, the loyal servant you abandoned for this meddlesome hussy. He jerked his head towards Rosalind. I shall kill you, Master Orlando, and sup up your remains. I don't think so, said Rosalind. Those ropes have been treated with garlic powder. You're not going anywhere until morning. What happens in the morning? Asked Celia. He turns to dust, of course, said Rosalind. He is a vampire, after all. But how? Said Orlando. Dark magic, I suspect, said Rosalind. My fault, really. You can't summon Hymen to Earth without bringing along some less savoury elements. Am I right? Aye, you accursed witch, Adam snarled. That fair trickster Dolus resurrected me, and I swore revenge. It has taken these 5 years to regain my strength, living off deer and sheep's blood, until I was ready to slay the vermin who wronged me. I didn't mean that, said Orlando. I meant, how could you do this, Adam? I thought we were friends. I was your servant, snarled Adam. Your family took everything from me, and then you dragged me into this desert. I died of starvation while you wrote your sopping ballads. You didn't even have the decency to mourn me. So you see, said Rosalind, class resentment. He killed the dukes and wrote those verses to frame you, Orlando, and that's how he was able to get from here to the court and back again so fast. Everyone knows vampires possess titanic speed and strength. And Jacques? Asked Oliver. You can't begrudge a man a bit of sport, growled Adam. Besides, he always irked me. That's all very well, said Audrey, but what do we do now? No one is going to believe a vampire killed the Duke. Why not? Asked Rosalind. They believed a god married off his daughter. Dawn brought a rosy light to the Forest of Arden, and a weary Rosalind carried a pair of yellow canines into the clearing. "'Tis done," she said. "This is all he left behind." But while Adam's body was indeed a pile of ash, Rosalind was not being entirely truthful. In the pile of rags that were his clothes, she had found a last crooked note from the servant's hand. Though human bodies turn to dust, no man can slake immortal lust, and evil spirits can return, while earthly minds do writhe and churn. Therefore look you to your lives, for in time even death may die. Rosalind took the paper and burned it. She had always hated poetry. She took her husband's hand and led him out of the forest.
But Not for Love was written by William Shaw, narrated by Georgia Cook, produced by Georgia Trintafilopulu, with music by Epic Stock Media and Tom Robson. Sound effects provided by Soundly.org. The episode illustration was provided by Luke Spooner of Carry On House. Joshua Boucher is our story programmer, and along with Jasmine Arch and the eyeless ones, Mary Pastrano and Cody Czarzasty, he helps manage our community. And a big thanks to Ben Arrington for the ongoing explosion of content he fires out of his social media canon. William Shaw is a writer from Sheffield, currently living in the USA. His writing has appeared in Strange Horizons, Daily Science Fiction, and Doctor Who magazine. Check out his website, williamshawwriter.wordpress.com. Georgia Cook is an illustrator and writer from London. She has written for publications such as Baffling, Basterian Lit, and Flame Tree Press, as well as the Doctor Who range of Big Finish. She can be found on her website at georgiacookwriter.com. The Other Stories is a production of the Story Studio Hawk and Cleaver and is brought to you with a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. That means don't change it, don't sell it, but by all means share the hell out of it. Until next time.